One murder every 30.5 minutes. One robbery every 1.7 minutes. One assault every 21.7 minutes. And over 85,000 active missing people. Crime happens anywhere and anytime. Thousands of unsolved cases causing time to stand still for its victims. The crime clock is ticking. The alarm has sounded. It's time for crime time.
And it's time for crime time again. Hi everybody, this is Jerry Dean. I have Sarah Block and Stacy Smith with me today, and we're going to talk about a couple of different cases. The couple that I'm going to talk about is Jonelle Matthews, who was kidnapped and was found murdered back in '84, and also Amber Geiger, which is a new trial that's going to be happening. It just started today, so I want to tell you guys all about that. But first, let's go to Jonelle Matthews. If you guys remember that name at all, she was 12 years old and she went missing in December 26, 1984 from Greeley, Colorado. She was last seen at school function at the Franklin Middle School. She was dropped off at home by her friend and her friend's dad around 8 o'clock. And by the time her father got home, which is about half an hour later, she wasn't there anymore. They couldn't find her. They didn't know what happened to her. And then her remains were found almost 6 months later by oil field workers digging a pipeline over at Weld County Road 46 and Weld 34 1/2, which is about 18 miles southeast of Greeley. So what is the reason that this one is coming up again is just recently a new suspect has been named. And you guess who it was. His name is Steve Parkey. He's from Twin Falls, Idaho. And Parkey has run in the Idaho primary for governor twice, and just recently in 2018. So he's a guy that ran for governor who's now a suspect in the murder of Jonelle Matthews. So let me give you a background of what's going on.
Yes, so we have to know.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit. So the police served a search warrant at his home back in August. No, he did the DNA in August. He gave them some DNA in August when they started talking to him. And then they went back and served a warrant at his home about the first week of September. But he wouldn't talk to them at that point. He said, you go get my attorney. I won't even talk to you unless I have my attorney with me. So Parkey was... Everybody's talking about what's going on with this guy. What is going on? Is he a suspect? Did he do something? Did he harm Jonelle? Is he involved? What's going on? So Parkey, in his attempt to stifle all the rumors and everything's going on, he did an interview with a statesman. And he said during that interview that he lived a couple of miles from the Matthews family when Jonelle went missing. Just a couple miles away. But he said that day that she went missing, the night before that night she went missing. So he was at home with his wife and they were packing for a trip to California. I heard rumors that they were going to Big Bear. They left the next day and he didn't even know Jonelle was missing until they got back a few days later. Then fast forward to September and there's the SWAT team showed up at his door. And since then, he's refused to talk to anybody. Now, I'll let you guys hear what he has to say with that interview with the statesman. Let me back it up here a little bit for you so you can hear the very beginning of it.
I've also, I've also lost a son. I mean, the Matthews family lost a child. I lost a child. So it's not like I don't have compassion here.
What do you think I need to know? What would you like people to know about the circumstances?
Number one, it wasn't until my wife and I and her 5-year-old returned from Colorado, or from California to Colorado on December 26th. That was my first night, on that night, and the car radio was the first time I heard that Jonelle Matthews existed or disappeared. That was my first knowledge of that. Probably most people don't realize in the 300,000 or how many missing and exploited children there are across the United States, there are a lot of people that are victims in it. It goes, the rock in the pond has many rings. It just keeps going out. There's a lot here. I am not against them solving it, okay? I'm for solving it.
There you go. So he's for solving it. What I thought was interesting is what he brought up, that National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. What I think interesting, let me turn this off, about that is that a lot of people aren't even familiar with that organization, and he's very familiar with it. I just thought that was kind of different there. So the
Definitely.
the Greeley Police Department is calling him a person of interest in the Matthews murder, but that's all they're saying at this point. So I want to know, do you think Pankey has something to do with Matthews' case, or do you think the Greeley police are building a case because they think he's guilty? I mean, what do you think is going on there?
Well, to me, Jerry, judging from the clip there that we saw of this interview, his whole demeanor and everything, the way he even answered the question seems very, I don't know, something's off about it. I mean, like you said, he brought up, and something else that was kind of strange about it is that, he talked about that it's not just the victim, that it's other people that, suffer when they're, exploited or a missing child. And so that's odd. I mean, who tries to take the focus off of the victim? And I mean, I realize that, the family suffer, the community, but I don't know. I've never heard that as an answer when someone is, it's thought to be involved.
Without knowing the full context of that interview or how they came to call him a suspect, I mean, a case from the 1980s, it is interesting to me. Like, I wonder if there's any correlation to him running for, you said he's already in a political position, or he's running for one, or both?
He did in 2018. He wasn't, I think he dropped out.
Huh. But we don't really know why he dropped out. I just wonder if there was a correlation whenever you put yourself in the public eye and they start digging into your background. If, oh, he lived really close to that missing girl, that unsolved case. I just wonder, whenever you get a new job or you're putting yourself more out there and people are going to scrutinize you more, or, your employer background check you and all that. Without knowing like all the details, I do wonder how they came to call him a suspect, because that's a huge deal. If someone wants to call me a suspect on somebody that lives within a radius of my house, what do you mean I'm a suspect? You would be defensive when you're innocent. For what are you looking at me for? If you start looking at some of the basics of what you just covered, like what Stacy said, it jumps out to me about kind of that deflection, talking about others that are missing, how it's an epidemic. Well, the interview isn't about the epidemic of missing, I would venture to say.
Yeah, really.
It's about the fact that you're a suspect.
It was a classic deflection, Sarah. That's exactly the term that I was looking for. I mean, he's deflecting, he's trying to deflect it off of himself, the scrutiny.
If you're guilty, it doesn't really look good to do an interview and somehow come across sounding guilty, because the other deflection was...
That was his intent.
The other deflection was that he had also lost a child, like trying to have compassion for the family losing their daughter. I don't know the details of him losing a child, but he was trying to empathize with the loss of a child. And yes, that little final statement of wanting it solved. So that means you're going to be cooperative and helpful and get yourself ruled out as a suspect?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's what he said his sole purpose was to doing this interview was to get it out there that he doesn't have anything to do with it. Now, I did do some more reading on and some other research and picking pieces here and there because I haven't found the complete story anywhere. But I did find out that he actually said that, let me find that one part, that he was, oh, where did it go? As soon as I moved my head. Oh, he was accused of date rape back in 1977. He says it was consensual, and the case was dismissed by the prosecutors. And then I did some more research, and I found out that there's been a lot of times that he's been in front of the courts. He said he's been charged with like 20 other arbitrary, that was his word, misdemeanors like battery and harassment by phone. And every time it's gone to trial, and he's always won. So evidently he's in and out of the court system quite a bit. So maybe that might be what people found out and why he ended up dropping out as running for governor.
Which is interesting because I don't know. I think about with crimes how sometimes people do hide in plain sight. So trying to profess your innocence, the general gist of, oh, if you were guilty, you wouldn't go put your face out there or be on the record. But that's the thing. If you feel above the law or above being caught or think that that helps you look more innocent to do it, then that looks like more of a ploy.
Yeah. So you
you
have
know,
you have the Greeley Police Department over in Colorado, and they got themselves together and they traveled all the way, well, not that far, but to Twin, what is it?
Twin
Thank you.
Falls.
Twin Forks. Twin Falls, Idaho, and the SWAT team is what went into his house. So they were planning this and ready to go in there, and they didn't know what they were going to find enough to know that they brought a SWAT team in there, and they went through his car, they went through his whole house, they gathered evidence, they took documents, and took him out of there. There's one place where he said Pankey himself is saying he gave the police his DNA back in August 15th. And then the SWAT team showed up in the first week of September. But then when the media asked the police, do you have his DNA? And they come back and say, no, we never asked for his DNA. Well, maybe they didn't ask for it, but maybe he voluntarily gave it, and this is why everything is leading to this. But then if there was DNA evidence and it was positive, I'm sure he wouldn't just be a person of interest. He would be charged at this point in time. So either they haven't had time to check his DNA, assuming he really did give it to them, so they can't charge him, but there's enough suspicion there that they're wondering, well, maybe we ought to go check this guy out. But they got to be they must have something for them to spend all that money for that team to go over to Idaho and knock on his door and try. And I think maybe they were hoping he would just talk, but as soon as he lawyered up, they couldn't do much.
I ran across an article just now since you brought up the case where it said that they had a warrant that investigators had probable cause to believe he kidnapped and murdered Matthews.
Yeah.
And here's one of his quotes, kind of what I was mentioning about going on the air or being cooperative as professing your innocence. He says, I'm trying to be transparent. I have nothing to hide. But I think it's interesting to have mentioned that in his interview, the clip, to have mentioned that I have never met Jonelle. I never met her family. I didn't know she existed or disappeared until Wednesday, December 26th.
That was another weird wording. I didn't know that she, how did he say it?
That she even existed.
I didn't even know she even existed or didn't. That's a weird thing to say.
So I've got another recording of him. You guys, I think, ought to see this one because he's pretty dapper in this one. Oh, incidentally, when I was doing a little bit of research on him, everything is saying he's 68 years old, but all the research I've done on him says he's 78 years old. But as I'm looking at him, I don't think he's 78. I don't know. Maybe they've made a mistake. There's nothing 100%, when I'm doing this kind of desktop research. But let me share the screen out here so you guys can.
Which makes me wonder how old would he have been in 1977?
Probably in his 20s, I would predict.
December 20th, 1984. I was home with my then wife and my 5-year-old, and our car was parked in the driveway. We lived on an acre just outside of town. The car was parked in the driveway. It was packed to the max to go to California, Big Bear Lake, California for Christmas to visit my folks. We were going to bed early. We put the little boy to bed early. We were going to bed early. We had no radios, no TVs on. I looked out the kitchen window, the front window, to see like snowfall, to make sure that our 2-wheel drive car could get out early the next morning. We're going to leave 6, 7, 8 hours later. And an unmarked sheriff's car and a pickup pulled into the driveway, turned around and left. I have a gay background. It's all over the internet. It's well known. And I had multiple problems with local law enforcement. And so I was thinking, oh no, here's coming another arbitrary charge. So they flashed their lights towards my house and towards the house next to me. And then they just turned around and left. So I thought nothing more about it. We went to bed. We got up 3 or 4 the next morning, got the little boy up, got in the car. My wife and son were sleeping as I was driving, so there was no radio on. We went to California, had a wonderful Christmas with my parents. On December 26, 1984, 6 days later, we were returning, and when we got back into in the evening time in Colorado, we heard on the news that there was a missing girl then. That was my first knowledge of it. We went home,
Terry,
we unpacked, we went to bed.
can you go back to where he starts talking about that and play it again?
Okay, what part are you talking about?
From the part where he says that they had just got back and they heard that there was a missing girl.
Okay.
Now pay really close attention to what he's saying here.
On the news that there was a missing girl then. That was my first knowledge of it. We went home, we unpacked, we went to bed. The next day was December 27th. My father-in-law came over, and I was not on a speaking terms with my father-in-law, so I was surprised that he came there. He was groundskeeper at the cemetery, and he said that a cop had come to him.
There's one follow-up question you must absolutely.
So isn't that something?
If you want him
They came to him.
Wow.
Oh, hang on a second.
All
Get through
kinds of
this.
twists and turns.
And said that he had a body that needed to be buried in a casket, and that it would look bad for Steve. And when I'm listening to this, I'm thinking this is kind of like the weirdest conversation I've ever had.
This is the weirdest story.
So I asked him, I said, are you wearing a wire for the police department? You know, what's going on here? And he said no, and he left. So then I called my attorney. His name is Don Janklow, the attorney I had at the time. And Cy, C.Y. was his secretary, and she said Don's out of the country in Israel. So he would be back the next week. So I searched all around our acre, around the neighbor's acre, where the cops had flashed the lights like a week before. And there was nothing there, you know. So I was kind of weirded out about this. Now, my father-in-law never said the name Jonelle Matthews. He never said anything about a child. He never said anything about a man, a woman, anybody. I got a copy of the newspaper and...
All right, hey guys, is he trying to say that his father-in-law was involved?
There was definitely a reference to the father-in-law working at a cemetery and something about a discussion
A body.
meaning a coffin.
Steve, but he is Steve,
and that it would look
so
bad for Steve.
Sense. Huh?
That doesn't make sense. This thing goes on for an hour. This is I didn't realize how long this was. I mean, I looked at it earlier. Let me see what he says about those 20 charges.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Who was a credit union manager who was gay, who was a friend of mine. Okay, I'll put it that way. He was a friend of mine.
I'll put it that way. He's a friend of mine. I'll put it that way.
So that went to it.
Not my banker. My special friend.
Making phone calls to her, drafting phone calls. That went to a jury trial. And, I was charged with driving 60 miles an hour in a 25 zone, which was a misdemeanor. All three of those went to jury trials. All three times the jury heard the evidence, picked a foreman,
right.
And then...
I didn't catch what the 3 charges were.
Well, one was for, I could go back and do it again. One was for, it's just kind of a lot of rambling here.
It really is. I mean,
it's so hard to follow what he's saying because there's so much rambling, but you can tell by what he's saying that nothing is his fault.
Oh, yes.
He's been cleared of everything.
Not me. And then what was that reference earlier that about everybody knows me on the internet? Gay,
about his gay history.
His gay history, and he's a married man with a couple of kids, but he has a gay history. Viva la différence, but I don't know what all this has to do. Well, let me see. When was this done? This was done.
He's okay with being open about at least past sexual deviancy.
You know what I believe that is? I think it's smoke. That's what I call a smoke. He's trying to cloud the water. He's trying to say, "Oh, I'm a gay man, so I couldn't have been the predator that did this to that girl."
or a bi man, but just still, we don't. Are we concerned about his sexual status? Well, he referred to himself
as a gay man. He didn't, when he's referencing himself, he says, everyone knows I'm gay.
I think it's interesting how he refers to his son as the boy.
I did too. I noticed that. And he did that only one time during that whole time that he was discussing his son. He only one time referred to him that way. The rest of the time he goes that boy, like it was someone they had picked up off the, to go on the trip with them or something. I've never.
Now, was it a mention of a 5-year-old daughter? Does that mean his son was younger than the 5-year-old?
It might have been. He did. I know he had more than one child. I know that. I think I saw 4 children he had. Or still has. Well, he would have 3 now with the his one son that his son was, from what I gathered, was in college and he was shot and killed by his girlfriend, the son's girlfriend. And that was about 2008. That was. Because
you can definitely see why this is the buzz, Jerry.
Let me back it up just to here because he's talking about the police now.
Okay.
He said yes, and I was surprised because I said to him, you were told not to talk to me. I thought that it was my ignorance, but I thought that they couldn't talk to me if the police. I thought the police couldn't talk to me if they were told to talk to my attorney. And he said he wanted to talk to me, and so I said, "Who all's with you?" And he said, Detective Mike Prill is with him. Now, these are both Greeley. It was not at Twin Falls. No Twin Falls, no detective has ever.
Wait, why do I recognize that name?
Except John Dawson.
Greenlee? That's where it happened.
No, the Prell,
Oh, all right.
the officer or the detective's name. Is that familiar to either of you?
I don't know.
I said I'm going to call my attorney and ask him. So I called my attorney, got him on the phone. He said don't talk to him. So I said to my attorney, you tell him that. So I came down here. Detective Cash is sitting right where I'm sitting. Mike Prill is standing about where you are. And I come up here, and it's like I handed the phone to Cash, and Cash talked to him, and Cash told him, what law says I can't talk to whoever I want to talk to, you know? And so he handed the phone back to me, and
I'm confused again.
Mike Prill got real close to me and said, we need to talk to you. And it was like intimidating. It was like that old school good cop, bad cop. Cash was sitting here, and it was like this is the first time he'd ever seen me in person. So it's like he was studying me. He was just like reading me. Just.
Well, yeah, they think you're
you
a
mean
suspect.
like he's a detective?
Of course they're studying you.
You probably haven't even.
I wonder if he was so fresh with what happened around that December 20th through 27th window that week from when Jonelle went missing to his memory of hearing it on the radio the day after Christmas. I wonder if he had been questioned at the time, if that's how he has such clarity of the packed car, which I looked up what kind of car it was, and I laughed because it was a 1980 Toyota Corolla, and my sister and I used to share one of those, and it got nicknamed. It was only 12 years old when we drove it, actually. I say only, but we thought of it as a very old car as teenagers, and people would call it the Toyota Crapola. But anyway, it's sort of or an aluminum can on wheels or on skates. Anyway, that was the car that they supposedly had packed up to go on that trip as a family. And that's it's a small compact car. But what's interesting to me is I don't know how many cars were in the family, but all that mentioning of having a car packed up to go out of state to Big Bend Park, or what was it called? The California
Big Bear.
I think I heard it was Big Bear. Yeah.
Big Bear.
Yes.
That's what I
And
meant.
that's where,
Big Bear.
when you're in California, Los Angeles and San Diego County go up to Big Bear because that's where the snow is. And
okay.
It's a good place where you go skiing.
Okay.
So they spent Christmas at Big Bear, I guess. But it is fascinating that he has some of this recollection of conversations and weather and learning about someone missing. It is interesting that for something such a cold case, where you would, if you were questioned for the first time, you'd be like, I don't remember, like.
Oh yeah,
much.
for sure.
I mean,
So he had to have been.
It said he lived 2 miles away from the Matthews family house, so that's not quite the same as being on the same street, but 2 miles away is. But anyway, it's interesting in terms of.
You would think, though, if somebody went missing and they were, 2 miles away. I mean, if someone went missing, from my town, even if they were, 10 miles from it, you would know about it. You would.
Of course, this is the 80s.
Right.
Newspaper, radio. That was about it. Yeah. Or TV. Yeah. The next day.
But I mean, it might have been a little delay, but you definitely heard if there was, a missing, teenager or.
Yeah, they probably go door to door looking around.
Yeah. If the police were actually at his house that night, and he's saying if they were actually there, were they actually there because they're looking for Jonelle? I don't know. Do they know more about him than he's saying? I don't know. This is assumption on my part. Okay.
It's really, I mean, it's with all these, he makes mention of all these other charges. And so, I mean, it is kind of hard to, follow what he's trying to, what his point is. Is he trying to say, they're picking on him, and so,
Yeah.
they've charged him with all this other stuff, and so that's why they're making him a person of interest? Or is he trying to say, maybe because he has an alternative lifestyle that he's being
That
picked
too.
on?
Yeah.
And
all of
so,
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And then my other point was, is he saying, I shouldn't be a suspect because, I'm a gay man and everybody knows it.
Because, well, there are several reasons. One is, like, if this is the way missing and exploited children are handled, okay? It's not the way to win friends and influence people, and no wonder there's a whole lot of them aren't resolved, okay? So I think there needs to be a national conversation about that.
Oh.
Number two, I didn't know Jonelle Matthews existed or disappeared until 6 days after the fact, okay? And any information I have, which is just simply one conversation, it revolves around a cop. Nobody seems to want to know anything about what a cop does. You don't cross the blue line. So
I don't understand that. What's he saying there?
whatever the judge.
He's criticizing the way the case is being handled. He's saying that if this is the way all missing person cases are handled, it needs to be taken to the national level because he thinks it's being handled incorrectly, that they're zeroing in on him when he has nothing to do with it. That's what
and then not crossing
what was
the
that,
blue
the
line.
comment about the blue line.
That sounds like
I
not
didn't
questioning
understand that.
law enforcement for doing what's right or doing it right.
Oh, okay.
All right, let me go a little bit more.
It's interesting, his commentary on the missing and on law enforcement.
I've never seen the affidavit that they have. I think it's probably baloney, but they won't give me that. They won't give it to my attorney. But what I'm getting at is as if the only knowledge that I have, if I have any knowledge, which may be nothing to do with anything, is that a cop is involved. And that's the thing that if I were ending up if they can get a search warrant, they can get an arrest warrant, okay? And if they had me in Blaine County Jail or Weld County Jail there, and if all of a sudden I was strangled to death or something like that, the truth to get out. So I don't know.
But my question is, I see what he's trying to say there, but my question is, why would they be going back after him now after all this time? If they're the ones that are stirring this thing back up again, is the police going after him. If they were trying to hide something or wanting it to go away, they wouldn't be going after him.
They would have just let the case
digging
die.
that up again.
Yeah. You know what else? Did you notice when he said, I haven't seen the alpha data. I think it's probably baloney. Well, if you didn't do this, then that's baloney. Mm-hmm. But that's not what he said. He said, I haven't seen it.
Probably.
I haven't seen it, so I'm not sure if it's accurate or, but I think it's probably baloney. I mean, you know what I mean? You know, if you were being charged with something that you did not do, well, then you know it's baloney because you didn't do that, you know?
I kind of
And
took
so
it
you
that
know it's,
I kind of took it that the affidavit didn't even exist. That's what I thought he was referring to. That was probably below that
oh,
it didn't
okay.
even exist. But then that also leads me to the point that do they need it at they need a warrant in order to go into his house, but do I need an affidavit at this point? I'm not quite sure. I thought the affidavit came when they pressed charges.
It, I think is he kind of using the terms interchangeably, like an
Could be.
affidavit for a affidavit of warrant, you know?
Could be. Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah. He may be more educated on that stuff than I am.
There are easier ways to do this. Impanel a grand jury, put me under oath, ask me questions, be done with it. They've got my DNA. Give me a polygraph test.
It's not
Give me a
admissible.
voice stress test.
Not admissible.
You know what? It is kind of odd that he's volunteering for that. He knows it's not admissible, but I mean, it would still be in the public eye. If he didn't pass it, it would still be, you know, an issue. Of course, he may not be worried about that as long as he stays free. You know, he's clearly he's used to some scandal in the public eye.
Yeah, this is another thing. It's kind of, it looks like he was all right in the beginning, and now we're going in towards the very end of this, and you can see he's pretty wore down at this point. And
special prosecutor.
it seemed like he went through a whole range of emotions, being chipper and happy, telling the story, and then being angry about it, and now he's just kind of like, you know, fed up.
Here's one last thing. Did you hear earlier this summer that her body was exhumed or found, I should say?
Yes. Yes, I saw that online. That's a totally legal thing to do, is look online. Yeah. When a Greeley cop come to you and accuse you of, or want to talk to you about this, it's a pretty prudent thing to go online and check on what's the updates.
Yeah.
So.
They didn't even ask him that. He's just
been
on the defense.
I was happy for the Matthews family. They at least because there was a lot of initial talk. There was a lot of initial talk in the beginning about like possible what do you call it? Trafficking or something like that. Like that, maybe she would have been forced into prostitution or something like that. I mean, when you're a parent and you know what happened to your murdered child, like me, that's bad enough. You live with it the rest of your life. But if you have a young girl and you've got these rumors going out there, possible forced into, I mean, that would be a horrible thing for the Matthews to live with. It's a horrible thing for anybody to think about that. So at least they know, I mean, they know for sure that she's gone, and they've got her remains. They've buried her with dignity in a cemetery. So I am very happy for her. That's when I did the who, why, because, you know, I think getting the United States attorney involved in here. You know, when you're talking about making deals, my relationship with the Greeley police is, it's just in your face all the time, okay? It's either you're crazy and you, I mean, from up here, from my Idaho side, you know, it's either you're crazy or you did it. I mean, it's just two polar opposites. That's not the way it is, and so.
Oh.
When did you move away from Colorado? Did you leave?
I left in, I
86?
believe it was late 1986 or early 1987.
Yeah, that matches what he said before.
To Ketchum, you said, I believe?
No,
Okay.
no. We moved, my then wife was pregnant with our second son, Carl, who was murdered later. But we moved to South Texas. Then we moved to Big Bear Lake, California. Then we moved to Portland, Oregon. Then we moved to Ketchum.
As you're watching it, do you have an opinion that he's guilty or innocent?
Well, it's not looking good to me, Jerry. Something's definitely, I mean, there's something going on with this guy because his answers seem, very strange to me. His whole outlook on the missing, um, his relationship with the police department, and also the fact that he doesn't say this, but basically he's giving other possibilities of what might have happened. He brought up trafficking. He also let's see, what was the other thing that he had said?
He brought
earlier?
up a manner of how someone might be killed. He made a reference to strangulation.
Yeah, and so it's I don't know. It just I'm definitely very interested in this story that you brought to us, Jerry, and I definitely want to find out all I can about it. And I just think that his whole demeanor is just off to me. And so I have to say I can't say that I think he's innocent at all.
I think it's
think that he had
interesting.
something to do with it.
Right. I think it's very interesting that he doesn't want to talk to the police and he says, you got to talk to my attorney first. But then here he is in front of the media and for an hour going through the whole story, his version of the story. So it seems like it's all right. If you want to talk to me and let me do all the talking, that's fine. But if you want to talk to me and answer me direct questions or want to put me under the microscope, then I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Right, because what he's doing is he probably has certain questions, like a lot of times when people set up interviews, they'll say, I'll do this interview, but you can't ask me this, or this. And so, he's trying to look like to the public that he's cooperating and that he's willing to talk, but there's probably some questions that he's not willing to answer. And I think the thing with his father-in-law, that's really strange. I'm still not clear what exactly he was trying to say. He did. I do know that he said that he thought that the father-in-law might have been, wearing a wire.
Yeah, he thought he was wearing a wire. Why would he think that the guy was wearing a wire? I mean, why would that be suspicious to him? And that was back. He's talking about something that happened in '84, right?
Well, yes, because he said there was a body.
December 27th, a conversation on about 24 hours after he first heard on the radio.
At the cemetery, right?
Right, and when he
not at the cemetery, he made a note that his father-in-law came over, but they hadn't been in speaking terms, and he thought it was strange that his father-in-law came over. So I assumed the conversation was listening to his then wife talk to her father. And one thing that jumped out to me was not only talking about your line of work in a body, but to make a reference to it doesn't look good for Steve. That almost sounds like he was eavesdropping and not part of the conversation.
That was a good one, yeah.
Well, that's what threw me because I didn't know. I'm like, is he referring to himself?
He was. That's how I took it. I don't know any other Steve in his interview.
But that's what had me through. I was like, he said, because that's when he was talking about a female, and he said that. So he's referring to himself in the
I don't know.
person.
You're professing your innocence, and you want to bring up some strange conversation. It is sort of like this far-fetched to implicate your father-in-law talking about a body who works in a cemetery.
Wait a minute. Maybe that was just his alter ego.
It doesn't look good for Steve.
So, ladies,
you know what, Steve? I think you're right. That's something we can all agree on. It does not look good for Steve.
That's funny.
I concur.
So, even though
does not make sense.
I think that's why they've had some probable cause. I think there's been inconsistencies, but maybe some oddities.
Mhm.
So even though the family got answers about 2 months ago when her remains were found for Jonelle Matthews, she was one of the milk carton kids in the 80s before they had Amber Alerts, and so she was one of the poster, kids on the milk cartons. I was looking at her birth date. She was just about 6 weeks away from being a 13-year-old, and they made a reference to her being theatrical, stubborn, strong. The mother even made a comment about her being physically strong, or maybe that was her friend. She had a friend saying that Jonelle was strong in everything, physically, strong-willed throughout her life. She knew what she wanted. She sounds like she was loud and the center of the room. So, and if she had just gone to a choir concert that night, I was going to say in the 80s, that's a pretty normal age to, whether her older sister was home at the time or not. That little brief time of being home before your parent came home. I was a latchkey kid in the 80s. And
yeah, there was nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I kind of wonder too, if you follow with what you're saying there, it also makes me wonder if she was in the house and assumingly her friend and her friend's dad dropped her off and she entered the house. I don't know if they watched her go in or not. We don't have 100% knowledge of that. I'm sure the police do though. But if she entered the house and then she went missing from the house, did she leave again or was somebody in the house?
Oh, you know what? That is interesting. Yes, I mean, could her parents tell whether she ever made it inside the house? Was there, was everything the way she left it? Was there a sign of struggle? I mean, that would be interesting to know.
Somebody ring her doorbell, and she answered it, and it was the person that grabbed her. Yeah.
Here's a little write up on the Coloradoan.com. It was referring to this place in Colorado. It was a safe place where front doors remained unlocked and kids' bikes were scattered on front lawns. A friend of one of Jonelle's childhood friends remembers, it was fun. It was normal. We rode bikes all over the place in the summers. We hung out, did a lot of sleepovers. I remember that time too, and we miss those good old days.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember as a kid, I mean, us popping a tent up in the backyard and think it was so great. And, we would all have these big aspirations and we were going to go camping. And then, about, I don't know, midnight or so, something would scare us and we would all run in. But the fact was our parents, felt okay with us being in the backyard. Of course, they would check on us and stuff, but that was not that unusual. I'm not sure we ever made it the whole night, but it just, it was considered safe. And we were all over our neighborhood on our bicycles. And, it was, you didn't think about having to worry about your child being snatched from your home or your yard or and I remember this case, Jerry. At first, it had not jogged my memory, but the more we talked about this, and the different details that come up, then I do remember this. And I remember them talking about him, being with his wife when he found out and everything. And then I also remember, his past, being brought up. And I don't know. It just, it's been unsolved for, a long time. And I don't know. There's just something seems unusual about his demeanor and something, his answers. And also, did you notice when he said, I'm trying to be transparent?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you mean like you don't have to try? Just I am
I
being
mean,
transparent.
if you're a transparent person, that just comes to you naturally, and you don't have to try. And and if you know, that almost seems like, would you say that that would be a personality trait? You know, some people are just transparent. Everything about them is just an open book. And so, you know, our personalities are things that are set in stone. You know, we don't. You know, they say even from the time that you're born, your personality is set. Now, you can change your behavior, you can change your style, you can change your hair color, um, you can even change your education. You can change your address, but you cannot change your personality. That is set in stone. Because that's something that develops from your DNA. You know, you get that strand from your mother, a strand from your father, and that personality is set in stone. So, like, if you're shy, if you're, you know, introvert, or if you're, you know, you can do things to try to, you know, be more outgoing or whatever, but your personality is just there. And so, I don't know, that just struck me odd. I'm trying to be transparent.
Try to be transparent.
Why is he having to try to be, you know, open about this, and you know, for people
I haven't
to
heard
be
any
able to
other
see through
named
him?
suspects or person of interest.
I was thinking about that too. This is the only one so far, and I don't know. And we still really don't know about the DNA because, like I said, the police aren't saying that they have the DNA. So
It's
we
interesting
don't know
they
about that.
found some of the clothes she had been wearing that night of her disappearance. There's a quote that said, this is on the 9news.com. This crew, if they had dug up for 15 to 20 feet to one side or the other, they never would have found her, says Matthew's father. So we really believe that God has provided a miracle for this to happen. They basically they'd already given her a memorial at her 10-year missing mark to let go and let her be at peace, and that they to release her. So not knowing if they would ever have an answer. So it's quite fascinating that now they're, even if it's 34 and a half years later, to find Jonelle Matthews's body. Now it's who did it, who killed her.
Yeah.
And tell me, how did they find her again? Was it just a coincidence?
Some oil workers were digging, and
a pipeline
over on Weld. I'd have to look at that on the map. I'm not so
right. How does that relate to Greeley, Colorado?
Wait a minute.
A couple miles,
Where was it?
Her house.
Where was she found?
Weld County, an oil and gas site. And then Greeley, Colorado is apparently, 60 miles north of Denver. So I'd have to go look at a map to see where that Weld County, how that relates.
Weld County, let me take a quick look, see if I can tell you before we wrap this up. Weld County.
And remember, notice he said, if they were holding me in Weld County, you know, the police officers, remember? And that's when he said that something had happened to him.
Yeah, it's not, it is, looks like it's out in, let's see. Let me get a little closer here. Let me look at the other map. You know how it looks sometimes in satellite map. So it's outside of Greeley. I keep wanting to say Greenlee. Outside of Greeley, and it looks like it's just, yeah, there's a county road. Doesn't look like any houses out in that area whatsoever. So somebody, I would guess, had to know enough to know if they went out there that her likelihood of being found was pretty remote.
Somebody thought that they had taken her out in the middle of nowhere and disposed of her, and they never considered that this oil, whatever it was, a pipeline or whatever was coming through, and you know, that was just a guardian angel, you know, that ran that, whatever it was, the where those, you know, construction workers needed to go through there and put the pipeline or whatever it was, and her, you know, remains were found. And so, but whoever, they thought that they had probably, you know, a lot of times it almost seems like he's one of these that thinks that he's kind of smart enough to talk to the public and talk to the reporters, and maybe that he thinks he's outsmarting the public.
I don't know. Yeah, he does like, it seems like he doesn't have any problem with the limelight. All right, well, we're going to wrap this one up. If there's any arrests
I did want to,
sure or anything, or we'll go back to this story and talk about it some more. And
just for curiosity's sake, Stacy mentioned she wondered if Jonelle had made it inside the house. I ran across something that says when her parents came home, I know one article mentioned 30 minutes later, but this one says about an hour later, her shoes had been left behind, the front door was open, and the TV was on. I just wanted to mention that.
She was behind, the front door was open.
And the TV was on.
Was the front door open, or was it unlocked? What do they mean by that?
Well, it just says open, so I'd have to go dig up.
Yeah.
You know, if this was a place that you left doors unlocked.
Yeah. Maybe it's open. Yeah. If it was open, then maybe she did answer the door and somebody grabbed her at that point.
Huh.
All right. Well, that's it. Well, so we spent a good portion of the show on this.
Very interesting case, Jerry.
We wanted to go
through the
story. Once we started digging in, it was really interesting. So
it really is.
That's it. We got it. We're going to make this show a wrap, and we will see you guys next week. And thanks a lot. It was good talking to you guys and discussing this show. And don't forget to find us on Facebook and iTunes and YouTube and all over. Just look for Crime Time Talk, and you'll find us. And thanks for listening, everybody.
See you next week.
Thank you. Until next time.
The views expressed on this podcast are personal opinions only. While all attempts are made to present accurate information, it may not be appropriate for your specific circumstances, and information may become outdated over time. Crime Time Podcast does not assume any liability with regard to results based on the use of information provided here. Furthermore, advertisers, commentators, and linked sites are solely responsible for their views and content, which does not necessarily represent the views of Crime Time. We welcome you to download and play the podcast and share with others for personal use. Please acknowledge the Crime Time Podcast as the source of the material. You may not, except with our express written permission, distribute or commercially exploit the content. The information is provided by Crime Time Podcast. We endeavor to keep the information up to date and correct. We make no representations or warranties of any kind, expressed or implied, about the completeness, accuracy, reliability, suitability, or availability with respect to the website or the information, products, services, or related graphics contained on the website for any purpose. Any reliance you place on such information is therefore strictly at your own risk. Thank you. And by all means, shove a few more words into these paragraphs so that I have to read complicated, comma-placed statements throughout an entire document and then try to record it in one take.